Wasn't it incredible? I wish we could see this kind of play more often.
It's just really true. They could sustain a fantasy play for 20 minutes, each with a specific role, and they changed roles and they had different themes. It was great.
Have you noticed they didn't even need that many props to keep them going?
Yeah.
That's great.
Hello, I'm Deborah Leong, and this is my colleague Alina Bedrova. We've worked together for the last 4 years in Denver, exploring Vygotskijan ideas and practice. In this film, we're going to be discussing the Vygotskijan approach to play.
Lev Vygotsky was a contemporary of Jean Piaget. He was a remarkably well-read person, and his thought was far-reaching. His most definitive piece on play was written in 1933, a year before he died, when he was only 37. Entitled Play and its Role in the Mental Development of the Child, it was originally a speech and contains many interesting insights on play.
First, we'll look at the benefits of play from the perspective of other researchers in Vygotsky. Then we'll look at the developmental path of play from the Vygotskian perspective. And third, we'll look at ways in which adults can help children become better players. In approaching play, Vygotsky touched upon the three separate ways that play had been studied at the beginning of this century. He referred to research from the affective and emotional standpoint, from cognitive, and from social. He took ideas from all three spheres and made them into something quite new, as we shall see.
This guy shot this guy.
Research on the emotional aspects of play generally arose from the psychoanalytic tradition of Sigmund and Anna Freud and their student, Erik Erikson. They looked at the aspects of play that present themselves as a working out of unconscious desires and conflicts.
Here.
These psychoanalytic thinkers believed that children gain the ability to better cope with the real world by acting out scenarios that frightened or worried them in play. They also observed that children play out wishful fantasies that could not be fulfilled in the real world. Play therapy, which comes out of this tradition, continues to be widely used in mental health settings with young children who have faced emotional trauma of various kinds. Lev Vygotsky comfortably referred to wish fulfillment in his 1933 speech, but his tack was somewhat different from that of the psychoanalysts. He saw fantasy play, in part, as a means in which a child could defer immediate gratification. Instead of throwing a tantrum or swallowing his desire when faced with something he cannot do, a preschool child discovers that he can fulfill his needs in fantasy play. This gives him control of a situation and of himself in new ways. In the West, we have studied the cognitive aspects of play, primarily through the work of Vygotsky's contemporary Jean Piaget. Piaget believed that play was a manifestation of the child's ability to represent things symbolically, and indicated the dominance of assimilation in the child's mental processes. Piaget saw play, like all development, as going from the egocentric to the social, and he wrote of the stages in play activity as moving progressively outward. Piaget wrote of three general stages of play. The first stage he labeled practice or functional play. It is characteristic of the sensory-motor period. During functional play, the child repeats known schemas for actions and the use of objects. The impetus for this play comes from the child's internal need for exploration. Symbolic play is the second stage and involves the use of mental representations in which objects stand for other objects. Play becomes increasingly social during this stage, according to Piaget. Piaget made a distinction between two kinds of symbolic play, constructive and dramatic play. In constructive play, children use objects to build and create other objects. In dramatic play, which Piaget felt generally emerged after constructive play, children create pretend situations using gestures and language.
Hey, I'm up here. Look at me, I'm right here. Oh, why are you tapping on my house? Get off of my house, T. I'm getting on my
Piaget felt that symbolic play was replaced at about the age of 7 by games with rules.
How come the back row has to be like this? That's the way the rules have always been.
Games are a result of the child's growing understanding of social conventions and moral development. Like Piaget, Vygotsky gave great importance to the fact that fantasy play enables children to separate the concept of an object from the real, actual object. Using a stick as a horse, a child starts thinking of horseness separately from his perception of the actual animal. This is a major step on the road to abstract thinking. Vygotsky disagreed with Piaget about the stages of play, as we will see later. He also disagreed with Piaget about the interrelationship between play and rule-making. Vygotsky felt that rules are integral to fantasy play as well as to games. For Vygotsky, the fact that fantasy play is governed by rules is critical to its importance in the child's development. Playing by the rules of a situation is an important way in which a child learns self-regulation, a subject we will discuss more fully in a moment.
It's okay, Tommy. Come in.
The socialization aspects of play have been well studied in this century.
You try to come over to there. No, this is the whole castle. And then you can be, you are helpful. So that guy was in a railroad. No. Don't play with those. These are decorations. Yeah.
Developmental psychologists such as Mildred Pardon, Jerome Kagan, and Caroline Howe, and anthropologists such as George Herbert Mead and Jane Goodall have carefully looked at how the young use play to practice social skills. Socialization is a critical aspect in all of Lev Vygotsky's work. He could not conceive of learning that took place outside of a social context. One of Vygotsky's students, Daniel Elkonin, continued his mentor's interest in the social antecedents of play and wrote at length on how specific play is to a particular culture. Elkonin felt that modern play is a relatively recent development in human history. He surmised that in pre-industrial societies, play was pragmatic. It prepared children for actual skills they would need in later life. In post-industrial societies, play activities cannot prepare children for the skills they will need, as those skills are too complex and sophisticated to be practiced by children. Rather, Elkonin proposed, modern play prepares children psychologically with underlying social and self-regulation skills, which Vygotsky had first discussed.
Animal, you see a color or a kind of animal you know you want to be?
Yeah.
You're going to be that kind? Okay, well, here's a close one to keep it on. Now you're ready?
As we mentioned in the previous section, Vygotsky differed from Piaget in thinking that fantasy play is controlled by rules. Each imaginary situation contains a set of rules and roles which surface naturally according to Vygotskians. Rules are the set of behaviors allowed either by the role or by the pretend scenario. In play, said Vygotsky, children do not merely act any way they please. They have to stay within the role they are playing, with its gestures, clothing, and even language. Because play requires that children inhibit and restrain their behavior according to the rules and roles of a particular play theme, play helps children practice self-regulation. As you can see, this child has to remember to act like a cat even when she greets her baby. In play, children cannot act any way they please. They must act in a way that conforms to the play scenario. This boy must hold still and play injured until the rescuers come. He cannot dash off, as tempting as it may be. He is practicing self-regulation. In another context, we can see that this same boy has not entirely conquered self-regulation. He wiggles in line and can't stand still. To look at him in only this situation, you would think he is incapable of controlling his behavior.
It was Vygotsky's revelation that in play a child was capable of more mature behavior than in everyday life. He wrote, "In play, it is as though he were a head taller than himself. As in the focus of a magnifying glass, play contains all developed forms in a condensed form. In play, it is as though the child were trying to jump above the head of his normal behavior." To understand why, we must review Vygotsky's concept of the zone of proximal development.
Vygotsky proposed that development should always be viewed at two levels. The lower level is what the child can do independently without help from anyone. The higher level is what the same child can do with assistance. The assistance can be direct or indirect. The zone of proximal development, or ZPD, is the distance between these two levels. It defines where development is occurring at any moment in time in a specific arena. It shifts upward as a person becomes competent in a skill and is thus ready to learn others. In imaginative play, Vygotsky sees the child operating at the upper level of his or her ZPD, being a head above himself. The play situation is scaffolding or supporting this child's ability to wait. With roles and a story to support him, the child can act out behaviors that are normally not possible. Let us review the major contributions to a child's development that play makes according to Vygotskians. First, play provides a child with ways to gratify his or her own desires through creating fantasy situations. Second, play allows a child to separate thoughts from actions and objects with the use of symbolic props and gestures. And third, play allows a child to practice self-regulation and other skills not normally possible in the real world. Now let us look at how play develops according to Vygotskians. In the Vygotskian model, play must have three elements. First, the creation of an imaginary situation. Second, defined roles. And third, hidden or implicit rules. As with other aspects of the Vygotskian approach, language must permeate all phases of play. Language both supports the imaginary plan of action and allows children to communicate their ideas with each other, therefore making play a shared activity. And thus we can see that for Vygotskians, true play does not emerge until late toddlerhood, when children have language and imagination skills. However, there are several early experiences that are critical for play's emergence.
How you doing today, Papa? Oh, that's my boy.
What occurs in infancy is preparation for play. The most important factor is the establishment of a warm, caring relationship with a caregiver. This attachment becomes the foundation of all later learning.
Come on, baby.
Learning to manipulate objects, to respond to language, and to interact with others are necessary precursors of play that occur in infancy. Adults must take the lead in providing babies with these crucial experiences in ample measure.
You want to do something with the baby's hair?
Yeah.
Okay.
In toddlerhood, some elements of play emerge, but they are not organized in the ways they will be later.
Okay.
Toddlers begin to use objects in a pretend way, especially when they are helped by adults.
Are you going to put him to sleep?
Adults and older children can help toddlers explore the rudiments of roles by assigning them role names and setting up imaginary situations.
Now, on the other patient, you're the doctor, okay? Yeah.
With the proper groundwork, play emerges in the preschool child in all of its glory and usefulness. Vygotskians believe that play is the leading activity for children of this age. All other activities are secondary in importance and impact.
I'm trying to cook. Do you notice that?
can you please go in and watch our football game? Sure. All right, let's see. What channel will the football be on? Hey, it's not on. I'm going to go yell at my wife.
Although we normally think of play as a social activity, Vygotskijans believe that solitary fantasy play, which they label director's play, is equally valuable for the child and should be encouraged. Unlike Piaget, Vygotsky saw fantasy play extending past early childhood into the school-age period. Vygotskians think that fantasy play has value in the elementary school years, although it loses its leading role in cognitive and social development.
You are clear for landing. People, it's obnoxious.
Vygotsky observed that games gradually do replace fantasy play as children grow older, but he emphasized that there remains a fantasy element in most games.
You're right, it was like right like that. Straight past the head. It would have hit the pole even if it went in. Oh, really?
Establishing and abiding by rules is one of the most valuable elements of game playing. Therefore, adults should take only a minor role in children's game playing during the elementary school years. When adults take over the function of referees, children are robbed of important lessons in self-regulation. But what if children don't engage in fantasy play or make attempts that are stereotypical and short-lived? Elena and I spend a lot of time in early childhood classrooms, and we have found many in which very little mature play is occurring. Children in these classrooms are likely to resort to the violent play, which is an early childhood teacher's worst nightmare. Not only are the children emulating violent models, but also the interactions themselves remain at the most immature level. The children are unable to control their emotional reactions and cannot follow even the simplest of rules. We believe that it is important for the teacher to intervene by suggesting other roles that can be just as interesting. Expecting these children to discover for themselves new roles or to work out the social conflicts that result from such interactions will not lead to the development of more mature play.
Who would be somebody that might rescue or save somebody? Would that work? If someone got hurt?
Police!
A policeman? Who else helps us?
A nurse?
A nurse could be a helper.
And even a fireman.
A fireman game we could play too, so we could be helping each other while we run and catch, right?
Well, let's see.
Because we're going to change it into a different Power Ranger that helps. What Power Ranger could help us?
I'm gonna be
A fireman. Okay, let's see who you're going to go help. Who are you going to rescue?
Hello. Oh. Hi. No. She's Duran.
There are ways early childhood teachers can foster mature play. For one, we suggest that adults assure that there is sufficient time for play. Children need blocks of time each day for uninterrupted play.
Okay, let's go. Trick-or-treating. Open the door. I can't open it. Why? Yeah, I'll open it for you. Thanks. You're welcome.
We could play house. What could we be doing in there that might be kind of fun and special?
Making dinner.
Yes.
Getting ready for a party.
A party! What a great idea. What do you think?
Putting on clothes.
Should we have a... Okay, can we get dressed up for our party?
Yeah.
Should we have a...
Another way of supporting play is by helping novices plan their play. Before a play begins, ask them about their plans. Verbalizing ideas promotes better understanding and establishes the state of shared activity.
Could this work for a cake? What do you think? Are the candles lit?
Adults need to provide appropriate props and toys. Vygotskians prefer props that are multi-purpose rather than specific. Plastic fried eggs, for instance, very much limit the scope of a play restaurant. It is better to have available generic dishes and pans. It is fine to coach individuals who may need help. We find that some children avoid the play area and need help entering play.
Yellow, green, green,
Want a bear? Here you are.
Teachers need to monitor the progress of play. There is a delicate balance between being too intrusive and ignoring opportunities to keep play going by carefully thought out comments that extend or enrich it.
Okay.
Now they're going to sleep.
Now they're going to bed.
Yeah.
Okay. Good night. Good night.
Hold up your puppets. Now let's sing the ABCs, okay? A, B, C, D, E.
Using older children as play mentors also often enriches play. The older children naturally take on the leading partner role in play and raise the level of interaction. We suggest that adults plan for this type of peer scaffolding in multi-age groups, either during school hours or afterwards.
Know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me? Yay.
You mean this part is your kitchen? So you built
And
the
that
kitchen.
part too.
This is the kitchen?
There's hot dogs.
Make sure that children get an opportunity to use the wonderful structures they built as a stage for imaginative play. Sometimes adults need to help children move into fantasy play by suggesting roles and plots they can use when all the blocks are used up.
Who else is in your castle?
Just,
Is there a king or a queen?
there's a, he's the king.
He's the king? Where do you sit, Mr. King?
Put him in here. I made a triangle.
Have you made a Did you make a throne for the king to sit on?
I won't sit down.
You
Do they go bumping into things? No, everybody tries to be safe.
Model appropriate ways to solve disputes. Learning to negotiate is one of the great benefits of play, as we have seen, but some children will need help in working out conflicts.
Then she sat down in Mama Bear's chair. But it was too...
Suggest or model how themes can be woven together. We have seen richer play after children have acted out stories in circle time. Children sometimes adopt these new, less television-programmed themes into their free time play.
When you sit up.
Show us. What does it look like? You fall out. Fall out of the chair. Fall out. You broke it. There you go. Okay.
Fostering play isn't always easy. As adults, we often have a hard time supporting the creative activities of children without taking them over.
Right. Like in any creative experience, there could be false starts in play or sessions that simply don't work out.
Yes, but the benefits of encouraging and supporting play are great.
This is too hot. This is too hot. Let's go on a walk.
Vygotski's insight that it was through fantasy play that young children learn valuable lessons in self-regulation has proven itself to us over and over again as we have worked with teachers in early childhood settings.
When it all comes together, we can truly understand what Vygotsky meant when he saw children acting a head taller in play.